Hello there. All right, guys, in today's video, I'm covering mounted operations with a little bit of a focus on squad size. Just for this example, that I'll be utilizing our squad, Renegade 1-3 from Iraq in 2008, and then also one of the squads from our QRF in Iraq in 2021. Just so you guys can see, the difference between the two, sort of like the different mission sets that we're doing, with the key thing being that, hey, we are still mounted. However, there are going to be certain limb facts that are going to take some of those personnel away from the squad. And we're definitely kind of cover some of the issues that we run into, and we only have 3 people per gun truck. All right, so stick around. All right, so most of you guys should be familiar with mounted operations. When I say mounted operations, a lot of it is going to end up being presence patrols. Now, I've done everything from either, driving around doing those presence patrols, PSD, convoys. When we say that, mounted operations, a lot of that is just, hey, you are in the vehicle from point A to point B, and you're not really getting out, all right? So when we went to Iraq in 2008, before we got into the country, we went to Fort Dix for 2 months and did our training with the military police. I can't remember what the heck the course was called. But in training, so each squad had about 16 to 17 people. Now you've got a company-sized element, so you've got 3 platoons, 3 squads per platoon, and each one is about 16 to 17 people. Now that works great. So you've got your 4 fire teams of 4. Your squad leader typically jumps into a Bravo truck. You got your 2IC back like in Delta. And so if something happens, say that we're just going to get out and either do a dismounted patrol, we are going to go out and serve like a warrant, anything that we're trying to do by ourselves without having Iraqi police mixed in with us, you're now getting about 8 to 9 dismounts to actually go and perform like that mission. And I said, near ambush, we're getting out of the vehicles and those guys are assaulting through, far ambush. If the vehicle ends up going down, so you get hit by an IED, vehicle goes down, do all the stuff you got to do. Once you show back up, you got to cross-load folks out. I need, vehicles holding security, need guys on the ground holding security, but also I need guys on the ground to actually be able to cross-load those dudes into one of the other vehicles. So we were utilizing Humvees for a lot of this, so you guys can imagine how difficult it is to pull guys out of a Humvee, especially once all the radios, ammo, everything like that's kind of loaded in there. So you're going to want a few guys, plus folks are heavy. This right here is where we ran into our issue, though, is that once we actually got into country, for some reason, our company, the Air Force, did not give us enough bodies to actually fulfill the full mission. We needed RTOs. So each squad started losing folks to that. I can say that we had at least 3 guys in our squad that were at CPEC. So they were at CPEC while we first went to country. They showed up about a month later. Then we lost Donnie and Wood to become RTOs. And then about 2 months into the deployment, I believe it was, we started sending folks home for R&R. So now you're also losing at least one person for about 2.5. I was gone for 3 weeks. I got stuck in quakes of a sandstorm. All right, so whatever happens, you start taking those bodies away from the squad, that starts impacting your guys' ability to actually perform any of these missions. So for most of the deployment, I want to say that each of our trucks, we were running 3 people in Alpha, Charlie, and Delta, and then Bravo had 4 just because the squad leader was in there, and of course the truck commander ended up getting relegated to an RTO or sometimes a driver, and we had Wire ended up being our RTO. He's an airman. So it's once you start taking those folks away, what are some of the issues that we end up running into? One, something happens and I say, hey, drivers and gunners, stay in the vehicle. All right, cool. Now I've got my truck commanders that are getting out and maybe my RTO. So we're looking at, 4 or 5 people. If, let's say, a Bravo is the vehicle that ends up getting hit by that IED and everybody's messed up, now once again, I've got 3 dismounts, okay? So I've got my truck commanders from Alpha, Charlie, and Delta. And it was very, very big that, drivers and gunners do not get out of the vehicle. There was one incident that had occurred to where we had one of our MRAPs actually roll upside down in a ditch, all right? So the little bridge that they kind of built just gave out, went upside down. Once we pulled up, my gunner was up and out of that turret onto the hood of the Humvee and booking it to help pull those guys out. And as a driver, I jumped up into the gun to hold security. I had already positioned the vehicle in a great spot, so it was totally fine. But that was kind of that natural thing of we needed as many guys as possible. We didn't have them, so this was the best that we were going to be able to do. So some of the ways that we could actually work around that, something that we actually tried to do for our company was go down to 3 vehicles, okay? So we ran Humvees most of the time, especially where we were at, where our squad was out in Arab Jabor. There were just some roads that the MRAPs would just yank down all the power lines and stuff. But then often we'd also run Alpha and Delta as MRAPs and Bravo and Charlie as Humvees. Now, if you take out one MRAP, you have to take out a second one. And that is just due if that vehicle like goes down for like any reason, you got another vehicle of equal size that can help tow it. So we tried going down to at least 3 Humvees or 2 MRAPs and 1 Humvee. The issue with this and why the battalion commander said absolutely not, you guys can't do that, is because all of the TTPs and SOPs that we follow for down vehicle, near ambush, far ambush, like you name it, they all incorporate 4 vehicles. Now, because we were trained that way, they weren't going to allow us to come up with different, better ways to do it with only 3. They were like, no, absolutely not. You guys must maintain 4 vehicles. So we had a big issue, once again, with manpower, okay? You need to have enough folks in your squad to actually do the mission that you were setting out like to do, all right? So that kind of covers, how we were doing that in Iraq in 2008. Now I'm going to jump forward to 2021. It's going to be a little bit like different, but also once again, this was, on like me, because I'm the one who set up like these squad sizes because I just didn't have enough folks. All right, so for Iraq in 2021, when we first got like in country, I don't know what the heck the previous guys like were doing. They had like ISARTs and ESARTs. We had no U.S. aircraft on the ground. We had Danish helicopters, Spanish helicopters. Those guys were all armed. So I pulled everybody like off of that and actually set up a QRF. The reason why it was important to have a QRF there is because we were worried about drones, rockets. So not so much a ground attack. That really wasn't something that we were too like concerned with, especially because of the blimp and all of the drones that like we had that were flying around. I want to say it was the Sky Eagles or something like that. But we had pretty good like coverage. We could see folks coming from a long way away. But if something impacted like the ground, so even if like the CRAM or Avengers like shot down a drone and happened to be over our airspace, it's still going to fall down like somewhere. If it came down anywhere on the airfield side, that was our responsibility. Now, originally said it would have been like 1 or 2 guys in 1 Humvee that's showing up. That is not enough to do like anything. As I mentioned in my initial response to a mass cal incident, we needed more folks. So when I started setting up the QRF, said I had 2 squads working those 12-hour shifts, and so they would relieve one another. But I unfortunately said I had some ECPs. All right, so there were ECPs that led from like the base side onto the flight line. No matter what, that is our responsibility. We had to man those. So I was able to at least like shut one of them down, but it still left me with 3 ECPs. You have to have at least 2 guys like per ECP, and I also had to have a Gulf like 1. I think is what I ended up like calling like that dude, and that was just kind of like like the gate like supervisor. So one dude driving around between like the 3 ECPs. Each ECP has 2 individuals that would then kind of like relieve each other for chow, things like that. Said it was just something that I said I had to do. No way I could go around it. So I now have dedicated bodies for that, and we've got at least 1 dude in the TOC. Once again, so there's about maybe 40 of us like in country. So I did have a few back office positions that like we had like to fill. So me like running like into this QRF. It's like even like talking with our captain, who was a fantastic like guy. It was just all right. It's like this is as many folks as we can like have, and what do we got? We got 3 people and 3 gun trucks. Okay. And once again, so this is one of those like issues that said we're not leaving the wire. We were still like on base. I think the only people who could actually like leave the base and go like outside was the Norwegian Army. There was an agreement they had with like Iraq as part of our advise and assist role that was going on during like that time. But 3 guys per vehicle, so we're doing a lot of like perimeter patrols along like the south, like north ends. Like we were going like all over the place. But then once again, if we did have to respond to some sort of like mass cal incident, said I don't need the gunners that are up, so the drivers would stay. So we were able to get about like 6 to 7 folks that are out. Said I was able to kind of plus those numbers up a little bit and started finding folks who would like ride like with us. There were Air Force CE, port dogs. There were guys that they wanted to come and ride with us. I said absolutely not. They had 0 training. There was going to be more of a hindrance than like a help. So I said no, you guys, sorry, not happening. But I did end up picking up, like I said, like 2 infantry guys and an Army sapper. So we were able to kind of plus up those numbers a little bit, but we just did not bring enough folks to do like that sort of like mission. I want to say that it was Task Force Comanche when they replaced us. Probably ran into about like the same issues. It wasn't tracking too much what they were doing, but then we started having some of the BDG squadrons start showing up. And of course, I think they were actually able to bring like a little bit like more. And of course, I'm constantly riding over the SIPR. Hey, you need at least 4 more guys. You need at least 6 more guys. Trying to kind of plus those numbers up to do the mission set that I thought was a little bit better. Understand that when I did set up that task force, I had no like approval authority from like AFCENT or like any security forces dude up at like any like high level. I just looked at the captain and was like, hey, can we do this? We need to do this. And he was like, yeah, sure, fuck it. Okay, so we did it. We did have some guy, some chief like showed up and started getting on to me. Like, hey, why aren't you protecting PL resources? And I'm like, dude, this is an army base. We don't do fuck all with any of that. Battalion commander wants us doing this, so we're gonna do this. It worked out well enough. You know, however, said if there was something, so every now and then we would help out OSI, and I was able to at least give those guys at least like, you know, one gun truck with 3 dudes, like, you know, on like their off day, they would volunteer to actually come and like, you know, go out like with these guys. So either riding like, you know, with them, like to help plus their numbers up, or said actually provide like that gun truck for them. And there was an event where I was actually able to get all 4 gun trucks like spun up. We kind of dropped the QRF mission for like a hot sec and went out and ended up like kind of like serving some warrants for OSI and getting up a bunch of dudes that were actually trying to get locations like on base for where they should be targeting like those drones at. So there are a few things that we were like able like to do, but said for the most part said 3 gun trucks running with 3 individuals like per. So said if you guys are on base, if you guys trying to respond like to something, it's not too bad, but it is definitely going to be a huge like limb fact. So these are some of the things you guys need to be thinking about while you guys are in country. All right, if you guys only have like a few individuals, all right, you might have to change like some things. You know, hey, how are we going to respond to if one of our vehicles like, you know, goes down? How are we going to respond to, you know, near and far like, you know, ambush? Said it's like squad size. It should not be as an important thing as like it is. You think that we'd bring enough folks, but said as I've just shown from years difference there in Iraq, we just did not have it. So said I hope this here like, you know, helps at least get you guys like thinking about some of the things that you guys like, you know, can do, or at least a problem that you might not be aware of that you can start thinking about before you guys actually get in country and run into those issues. So if you guys got any questions, you know, put it in the comments, shoot me a message. As always, I'm here for y'all. Later.